Very excited to be hosting today's March webinar. March is Nutrition Month, which is why we are focusing on the topic that we are today. Please, as you are listening, if you have questions, feel free to type those into the question box. While I will be holding the responses until the end of the session, it will allow you to keep up to current questions that you may have on any of the slides that you are seeing. So again, I'm excited to be able to host what is a monthly event for Synergy Home Care. And we do this monthly. These are all recorded and can be then viewed on our Synergy YouTube channel. And after you attend this, or if you have a colleague that may be listening to this after on the YouTube channel, you can then email us to receive your certificate of attendance. So today we're going to be talking about enhancing the senior nutrition experience. We're going to dish a little on dining. While you're listening, many of the things that we're going to be talking about are not specific to any one age category, so you can really think about many of these ideas and tips and resources for those across the age spectrum and across the ability spectrum as well for the dining experience. This webinar is not to be seen as providing medical advice. Please work with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your diet plan. So I want to begin with discussing what the agenda is going to be during this webinar. The first is we're going to set the tone and really discuss why this is an important topic. We're going to talk about why there are some senior nutrition concerns that are unique and again across all abilities, and why these nutrition concerns are unique due to changes in the census, chronic and progressive diseases, and the use of medications, which we see on average in the senior population almost over at least 10 medications. We're going to discuss food safety. We're going to expand upon the idea of creating the right atmosphere. We're going to touch upon hydration as well as nutrition. And we're going to also share tips, tools, and resources throughout this webinar as we discuss the variety of topics. So let's begin with why this is such an important topic. As we age, many changes occur which can lead to nutritional deficits. And while these can be adjusted, it is important to recognize them quickly and make the changes necessary. So some of the things that come into play and why, particularly for the older population, why nutrition tends to become a concern is often around some of the losses that are happening in one's life, particularly in family. And losing one's spouse certainly can take away the enjoyment of a meal. If we think about it in our culture, having a meal is such a social activity. Nutrition is really tied to the social and emotional. It is no longer, for many, just seen as a means of health, but it really is a social activity. It is why when we see somebody change their diet habits, it really often isolates them from others because they no longer feel like they can participate in the same way. So when somebody loses a spouse, it takes away that emotional, social connection, and depending on what role that spouse had in the life of the meal and the nutritional health in that family system, it may also take away the person who really was responsible for ensuring that a nutritious meal was placed on the table day in and day out. We also see the difficulty that even getting out to a grocery store or the decreased capability of navigating the store can limit food choices, and that navigation may be limited due to cognitive changes or may be limited to physical changes, as well as the difficulty accessing grocery stores that have large options may be diminished due to difficulty in transportation. When we think about how medication usage increases for much of the senior population or for those who are managing chronic and progressive illnesses, we also can recognize why some of the nutritional shifts and changes are occurring. And we're going to talk a lot about medications and how those can be impactful on one's nutrition. We also can't diminish the role that sensory changes have in the life of nutritional health. And we're going to talk about those because certainly we see the sensory changes across the age spectrum. And again, the older we get, the more these sensory changes are occurring. However, as I talk about them, you will see that there are many resources and tools and tips that we're going to share that will really minimize the impact. Certainly, cognition and memory concerns, which can increase with age, although again, cognition and memory changes are not a normal part of aging. We do see higher percentages of diseases that impact cognition and memory in the elder population. And because of those, we're going to talk a lot about what happens with those and how it impacts nutrition. In addition, changes in motor skills impact both kitchen safety as well as the preparation and the food management for individuals. This is such an important topic, and again, with the medications, that they have an impact on taste and appetite as well as complicating the eating schedule. So again, we're going to be discussing that medication piece. Of the millions of older adults admitted to the hospital every year, at least 1 in 3 is malnourished upon admission. When we think about malnourishment in this country, we really don't have the view of when we think about it, and we rarely utilize that terminology, but malnourishment is really a medical terminology versus how we think about it as a societal concern. So often in developing countries, we think about malnourishment and the pictures that we see of children who have not eaten for many days. We tend to then minimize the impact of shifts in our own nutrition and how closely tied to a medical malnourishment can be. So 1 in 3 is malnourished upon admission. So a really strong correlation certainly to changes in one's health and how it impacts where they need to be receiving care. It is estimated that there are more than 3.7 million seniors who are malnourished. And again, as we walk through the slides for this presentation, that won't be simply because there is not access to food, but it is because often of the appetite changes, the sensory changes, the social emotional changes that we are not having the nutritional health that we did when we were younger, versus it being simply a matter of access. Again, malnourishment is a real concern for many older adults. And this has a larger issue for older adults because it can impair an already complicated medical history. Malnourishment from a medical perspective weakens one's immune system, which often can be compromised already in the elder population due to other disease kind of systems that are happening. It can lead and complicate wound healing. And again, we're seeing difficulty in wound healing already due to increases in the rate of diabetes, which impacts the ability of the body to heal. Often we see those who have limited ability to transfer from one placement in their home to another, so they're sitting for long periods of time and having sores that can develop, and then again, because of poor nutrition, we're having poor wound healing. So again, shows how important and why this is such a key area. Malnutrition can lead to an increase in muscle weakness and a decrease in bone mass, both of which are a bad combination for an increase in falls and fractures, which, as we know, are very complicating for those in the senior population and often leads to a decline in their other physical health, and often, again, takes people out of the place that they want to remain, which is their home, even if it is for a short period of time. As we saw on the previous page, with 1 in 3 seniors who are hospitalized or also have malnutrition, it definitely has an increased risk for hospitalization. And malnutrition in itself can change the efficacy of a medication regime, because medications may not be absorbed as well if we are not also feeding our bodies. So malnutrition can lead to poor medication regime, which can lead to illness and complications. And on the other side, medications can lead to decreases in appetite and nutrition, which can lead to illness and progression of disease. So kind of a chicken or egg situation when it comes to medication and malnutrition. I want to start with thinking about changes in the senses. And again, this comes up in a lot of the webinars that we produce here at Synergy Home Care, because again, these changes, if they are not taken into account, really can impact the daily living experience and quality for seniors living in their homes. So let's focus with hearing. And while hearing itself does not change the physical ability of eating or hunger, it certainly has a strong impact on the emotional and social experience to such a degree that it impacts the food experience. When we think about those who are experiencing hearing loss, they certainly find themselves isolated from conversation. They remove themselves from social interaction, and because our dining experience is so closely tied to our nutritional health, we can see how hearing and the changes in hearing can really impact nutrition itself. Something we would not typically connect together, but something we really have to be very focused and aware of if we have a senior in our life, personally or professionally, and we see them kind of isolating due to that hearing loss. We have to be looking at how that's impacting their quality of life in a nutritional sense. Smell, as we age, the sense of smell declines with age. Often this is a gradual decline, so we may not be aware of the change itself, and often we're seeing this after the age of 60, but particularly more pronounced in our 70s and 80s. The sense of smell can certainly impact the enjoyment of food, or it increases intake of the wrong food because you want to be incorporating foods that really do have that smell, or then certainly the taste in them. And so those may be those foods that have a higher sugar content, a higher salt content, and so that certainly can be impactful. Food also may smell foul, which can impact taste itself. We're going to talk in a few slides also about food safety and how these changes in the senses impact our food safety awareness and ability to manage, and how we can have some resources for that. Taste, which is often tied to smell, also decreases as we age. Part of this is due because the number of taste buds decline, and sensitivity to the 5 tastes often decline. And the 5 tastes that are talked about is umami, bitter, salty, sour, and sweet. So when you think about those, as you're thinking about how you can make improvements in somebody's desire to be eating foods nutritionally, you want to focus on some of those different taste buds and really heighten how we bring out those tastes. The other piece that we see often with age is dry mouth, and dry mouth can come from a variety of areas, decrease in production of saliva, which may also be from either disease or from medication. But dry mouth itself can impact the sense of taste, which in turn impacts the changes in nutrition. Umami is one of the tastes that we often don't talk about, and there was a question that just popped up. That, if you think about it, is really kind of, like mushrooms. It's the earthy types of tastes. So earthy mushrooms, things that are really coming from the dirt is what that represents. So managing sensory changes. The first is not to overlook them or minimize the impact that it has on nutrition itself. The second we're going to talk about is the safe food management and ensuring that a professional caregiver, a family member is consistently looking at someone's cupboard and fridge to make sure that their limited visual, limited smell and taste is not creating a situation with the food that they're keeping where it becomes bad and where bacteria has begun to grow. We're going to talk about that further. In managing sensory changes, we want to, again, if there is a decrease in smell and taste, we want to be adding flavor, but we want to be looking for low sodium options. And what often has happened in the past is that to add flavor, we just add salt. And flavor can be added in a much more healthful way through either low salt spices, but really just through fresh herbs, from spices themselves, from sauces that are made, again, in a low sodium, low fat way, but really do add that flavor. The other piece is exploring your medications, because there are some medications that, again, can impact the senses themselves. And so an important conversation when new medications are started is, as you're looking through this or listening to this webinar, is really thinking about questions that can be asked of your pharmacist and physician as they prescribe any different medications as to how it does impact in the nutritional realm. So let's talk about chronic and progressive disease. And as we've shared in past webinars, as a country, we're experiencing an unfortunate kind of explosion of the number of chronic illnesses and symptoms that we experience over our lifetime. And we're really seeing that for many seniors and really those in middle age are beginning to have 3 to 6 chronic disease situations happening that may not necessarily impact one's physical daily living or are able to be managed with the assistance of changes in the house setting or with the introduction of professional caregivers, but they also impact nutrition. And again, one begets the other. Good nutrition begets good health and vice versa. So some of the physical obstacles to eating and why, again, those in the elder population often have more challenges is because many of these chronic and progressive diseases are impacting those in the upper age groups. Arthritis, for example, where swollen extremities and hands and decreased joint function impair the physical task of food preparation and eating itself. Strokes, which again, a large proportion of those who experience strokes are in their elder years, can cause both paralysis and weakness. Sitting up can be impaired, so that will certainly impact one's swallowing ability and increased vulnerability to choking and aspiration, which is choking on food that can be then taken into the lung and cause of infection. But it also can impair the act of simply holding utensils or utilizing kitchen tools to be able to prepare meals safely. Chewing and swallowing are also problematic for many after a stroke, and so again, people then tend to step away from those things that cause difficulty or fear that they are going to choke, and so they minimize the types of foods that they are utilizing and then in turn impact their own nutritional health. We can't underestimate the impact of how dentures and our teeth impair our nutrition. Missing or damaged teeth can make the act of eating very difficult. Changes in facial bone structure or fluctuation in weight can all lead to ill-fitting dentures, which itself impedes good nutrition. It is so important that if you are providing care to somebody or a family member, that you are constantly looking for those signs where they may need to go to a dentist. In fact, it's important to be going, every 6 months as we get older, because those infections that can happen or changes in the teeth that can happen can really impact not only one's health but also one's nutrition. If you're listening to someone talk and you hear a kind of a clicking sound and as they're speaking, oftentimes that is ill-fitting dentures. Which may just need to be relined because, again, there's a loss of bone structure or weight, and the changes in the face appearance, the dentures don't fit as well. Parkinson's. Parkinson's can lead to a difficulty with swallowing. The medical terminology for difficulty with swallowing is dysphagia. So you may see that on a medical record of a parent or a client. And it can happen along the stages of Parkinson's. So again, it may not happen early on, but it can shift and change as Parkinson's progresses. Oftentimes, those with Parkinson's will do more coughing or throat clearing, which when you're doing that during your meal can cause choking and a feeling that food is stuck. And again, that begins to impede someone's desire to want to eat because they become fearful of something that is a very scary experience. Physical changes with those experiencing Parkinson's and tremors can make every meal a challenge. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that can be adapted to really help with that. But if you have somebody in your life or you yourself are experiencing either Parkinson's or essential tremor, you know how difficult it is to be eating, and particularly tend to isolate yourself because you don't want to appear in a public dining environment and you feel very self-conscious if food is dropped as you're eating. Visual changes. So visual changes can occur for many reasons, but the perceptual problems this causes can lead to the need for adjustments to the environment to aid with both preparation and the actual act of eating. So how do we manage some of these physical obstacles? Certainly regular dentist visits, as I shared, looking at going at least every 6 months. Really recognizing that dietitians and speech therapists can be so useful in helping to put together a plan for your specific nutritional needs based on your physical health concerns. Speech therapists, who we often think of just in terms of being able to assist with our language, really many are specialized in dysphagia, the difficulties with swallowing, and can really help with some exercises that will minimize the risk of choking, can help with swallowing, but also provide a list of ways that food can be prepared to best meet the needs of those who may be experiencing these difficulties. Don't minimize the impact that just preparing finger foods and cutting foods for ease can have on one's nutrition. Being able to just pick up things without having to use that addition of a utensil can really aid in someone's ability to eat independently. If you think about cutting carrots julienne style, which would be kind of on the lengthwise versus in little circles on the short way, that itself is going to, one, allow someone to pick them up, but also minimize those circles, which can be difficult to swallow, or if they're swallowed whole, if they're not chewed well, can also lead to choking. Adaptive devices. There is not enough PowerPoint space to put all of the different adaptive devices that are available now on here. You know, there's some just ingenious ones. This one for the tomato that holds the tomato and allows you to cut it without, you know, slippage. The coffee mug that has two handles. So again, that shakiness is minimized because of the way and the weight of the glass to be able to pick up. Plates that have kind of a higher edge, so that food can be that edge can be used to help get the food into the utensil, but also minimize the kind of mess that can happen and then make people feel more comfortable to be eating. Eating small but frequent meals may be helpful, particularly as people's physical disease progresses. You often will have a reduction in appetite, and so the idea of preparing a big meal is not something that people want to do, and they feel wasteful. So looking at ways to have smaller meals throughout the day, really packing in the nutritional value in those smaller meals can be very helpful. Just how food is laid out on the plate is so important, because again, it allows for easier access. It allows for it to be seen on the plate, particularly if you have a visual impairment. And most important, don't rush the meal. I think sometimes caregivers, family members often want to kind of have people move on to the next task. And if we're eating with a family member that has some concerns in terms of their meal time, when we're done with eating, we feel like we're just kind of sitting around, and really utilize that time to spend some quality time with the person. We're going to share some ideas as we move forward with that, but don't rush the meal. It's certainly rushing, the person feels that. It can increase the risk for aspiration, again, for bringing in food that gets sucked into the lungs, and for choking. So don't rush the meal. Plan it so that you have something to do, which is not looking at your phone while the other person is eating, because oftentimes people will put down their fork, say they're not hungry anymore, but really they just feel kind of embarrassed about how long this experience is taking. So let's think about and look at cognitive and memory obstacles to eating, because these are key in the nutritional experience. The two, most familiar ones are dementia and Alzheimer's, and again, there are going to be a variety of complicating factors with this disease. Just some of the physical changes to the olfactory system itself. So if we think back to the slide about senses and taste and smell, so just there's changes that are happening with this disease that go way beyond just the cognitive and memory aspects. We often think about dementia and Alzheimer's as a cognitive and memory disease, which it is, but in the later stages, the physical changes that are occurring in the brain and in the body really also complicate the nutritional and meal experience. There is an increasing inability over the course of these diseases to perform the physical tasks needed to prepare and eat a meal. The act of just taking food from the plate and getting it all the way through into the stomach, there's more than 30 kind of different things that have to happen, that each one of those steps, and if we think about the voluntary and involuntary aspects of those and the changes that dementia and Alzheimer's cause in those involuntary and voluntary movements, you can understand why the act of eating becomes so complicated. Memory deficits can cause someone to not remember to eat or not know what they should eat. And so, you know, again, people are either overeating, which is no more healthful for them, undereating, eating the wrong foods, and particularly this is difficult if there is a secondary diagnosis or a third diagnosis that really needs to be carefully managed with nutrition. So again, memory deficits are impactful there. Because of executive functioning changes in the brain, oftentimes they're more inappropriate mealtime behaviors. Someone may take food off of another person's plate. You know, they may be playing with their food. So again, it may limit how we experience the dining room with people who are living with dementia and Alzheimer's. So needing to take that into play. Changes in how one interprets sensory information, such as reacting to smells and taste, which can increase an appetite, or understanding the signs of hunger and thirst. So again, the body changes, the brain changes, the physical changes are in the brain are also interpreting sensory information that those who are not living with these diseases can easily experience. You know, we know what the sense of hunger is and thirst, and if we aren't given those tools and our body doesn't interpret what kind of a rumbling stomach means or what kind of a dry mouth may mean, we're not necessarily feeding it or bringing drink to it. So how do we manage dementia during mealtime? You know, some really simple things from a social aspect is preparing familiar dishes. So, you know, I know that one of the things that we do with Synergy Home Care on our home assessment, and as we're developing a plan of care, is to really talk with families about, you know, what has mealtime looked like in the past when someone was, you know, not experiencing the physical or cognitive changes that have brought us into their home as a caregiver. And so we can begin to prepare those familiar dishes, which again, just the sight of them can increase someone's appetite and desire to eat. Really utilizing specialized utensils to enhance independence. You know, it's so important to minimize the need to bring somebody in or to have somebody help with the feeding before it's too soon. While that caregiver is there to be preparing meals, to make sure it's safe, to make sure they're nutritious, we don't want to rush somebody's need to have them be fed. So we want to make it as easy for them, and adaptive tools, finger foods, the way things are cut, again, are going to aid in that. The use of contrasting color plates so that food is easily distinguishable is huge. Red, we just recently posted a blog for Nutrition Month from Synergy, and red was the color of the plate that we've talked about. You don't want your food to blend into the plate. One, visually, it's difficult to see what's on the plate. Two, it doesn't kind of send those messages to the brain to kind of, ooh, this looks really good. I want to eat this. So we really want to make sure that we're using contrasting color plates so food is easily distinguishable. Finger foods, again, and finger foods don't have to infantilize someone. There are a lot of finger foods that we can eat that are nutritious. We're not here talking about corn dogs and chicken fingers, where chicken fingers can be made in a way that are very nutritious and not having to be dipped and fried. So think about different finger foods, and again, there is numerous websites that you can look at for preparing these type of foods. Telephoning the person to remind them to eat, and not just as a call to say, Mom, have you eaten? Or, you know, don't forget to eat, but using it as a touchstone, having some fun thing that you're going to share with them about your day, and you know, again, you can just kind of have a list of things to start the conversation. You don't want somebody to feel chastised or embarrassed that they don't remember. So you don't want the call to be simply about the act of eating, but really a social call, and then saying, hey, Mom, I'm going to be starting dinner for the family. You know, tell me, have you eaten yet? What are you going to eat? So doing it in a way that that isn't embarrassing to them and brings it back to you and more of a storytelling experience. Writing down simple step-by-step instructions. Don't think that you can't use pictures and you have to just use words, because again, pictures often are much more familiar to those as their dementia progresses than words, so they mean a lot more. So writing down very simple step-by-step instructions are important. Organize the kitchen, remove clutter. The more things that are available in the environment to someone who is managing dementia and Alzheimer's, the more choices they have to try to make and try to figure out which one do I use. If you simply kind of remove all the things that someone's not utilizing and simply keep those items in clear view out, it's going to be a trigger for somebody. So that whole idea, if we think about selling a house and the best presentation of your home, and you want to remove everything from the countertops, this is not that time to do that. This is the time that you want to put back on the counter, to put into clear view those things that you want somebody to utilize and remember. Caregivers should always be at the table with somebody eating with them to provide visual cues on how to eat, as you want to, again, avoid stepping in to feed someone too soon. The act of having someone there with them, also that social environment, is so key and so important. And don't rush the person. You may even want to present one food at a time. So again, they don't become too overwhelmed and don't know which one to eat. Or do it in a very strategic kind of way, making sure you're starting with the most nutritious, so that if they do become full, that they're now not left with, they've only eaten the applesauce, versus the proteins. So again, be thoughtful of how you're presenting food to somebody. All right, let's talk about medication, because we have discussed this and how impactful it can be on nutrition and hydration. Medications can suppress the sensation of hunger itself. So even in someone who has the cognitive capabilities and the executive functioning to know when they are hungry, the medication itself may minimize that sense of hunger. Medications can interfere with the way nutrients are absorbed. So again, very important when any new medication is being provided by a physician to really just ask, what are the impacts of this from a nutritional standpoint? Are there going to be changes that I'm going to experience in terms of how foods taste, what they smell like? Am I going to be hungry on this? So medications also can alter the sense of taste and smell, interfering with eating. Certain chemotherapies, for instance, and treatments for cancers can create a metallic taste, particularly when someone is eating red meat. So really being aware of that and taking it all in as you develop kind of your plan for meal preparation. Something that, again, we focus on when we're doing assessments in the home and setting up a plan of care, is to understand all of those kind of intricacies of what's happening in someone's health, to really not just know how we can provide hands-on care, but how we can provide the best meal experience. Medications can cause some problems with swallowing. They can create a complex routine which can impact mealtime. If you think about it, and if you have more than one or two medications that you're taking on a daily basis, and you look at the directions that for that medication, some you take with food, some you take with fluid, some you don't take with food, many you shouldn't eat within 2 hours of. So think about the complexity for somebody to plan a meal around all of those medications if you're taking 3 that all have competing directions on when you can and can't eat, but you're supposed to take all the medications about the same time. So really thinking and working with your physician, your pharmacist, to go over the list of medications and see how you can manage meal times based on how the medications should be taken for their best efficacy. Additionally, changes in diet and nutrition can impact the effectiveness of medications themselves and increase risk from medication management. So there are some foods that can impact the effectiveness of medications. Important, again, to always talk with your physician and pharmacist with the introduction of any new medication. Again, there are some contraindications with nutrients and drug interactions, so always have that conversation. Never stop taking a medication without having the conversation with your healthcare team. Food safety, really important. Fridge management is what I like to call it, and there are a variety of reasons why people end up having food in their fridge that is really bad and should not be eaten. Some may not cause any problem, but many could have an increase in bacteria on it or can cause someone to get sick. So making sure that the visual impairment someone has to be able to see the small buy dates, to see the use dates on it is really important to have someone else take over that role. Shopping and preparing food, so oftentimes people shop and you know, it's difficult enough to get out to the grocery store, so they tend to overbuy, and especially if they're buying produce and fresh things, it creates a problem because they just can't eat it fast enough. Or they think that they were going to eat it, but then they try to eat the apple, and it tends to not work with their dentures, and they don't have the physical capability of cutting it into smaller pieces. So just the shopping and preparation itself. Kitchen appliance safety. So really thinking about how the appliances in one's home can create a negative environment from a safety perspective. This is certainly true for those with cognitive changes, but it is as true with those with some physical changes. If you think about stoves and where the knobs often are placed, knobs are often placed on the back end of a stove. If you have difficulty and you're using a walker or a wheelchair, to try to reach back to get to the knobs can be difficult. You're also reaching over a hot stove and burners. So thinking about how are the appliances in your home designed to best meet your needs and the needs of someone you're providing care for. So some tips and resources. Look at having containers that have erasable spots on it or stickers that you can use for dates. Mark all leftovers with an eat-by date. So if you're taking someone out to eat and they may have some visual issues, some cognitive concerns, you know, write down when you bring them back home in big letters when to eat by. You know, look at purging a fridge weekly, really kind of making sure that you're taking a look at everything. But don't go in and rush into somebody's home and begin to take things out of the fridge with one, asking permission, and two, not replacing it. So if you are concerned that someone in your life is not replacing food and there's bad food in there, you know, kind of take an inventory so you know what may be going bad. And every time you come, you know, think about bringing that small, you know, quart of milk. Or a couple of apples, because if you know that you're going to be removing some bad apples in the bunch, literally and figuratively, and taking out that milk, replace it. Because if not, again, that person has to then figure out how they're going to go back to the grocery store. They may not have anything good to eat. And we always want to ask permission. We never want to remove something, even if it's for someone's benefit, without asking their permission, because it minimizes them. It makes them feel like they don't have choices and options, and that you see them as frail and with no ability. And even those who are living with cognitive and memory impairing diseases, for their entire time are going to feel that sense of control in their life, and we have to make sure that they have that sense of mastery. Think about teapots with auto shutoff. So if somebody really likes to have hot water, you know, and there's a concern that they would leave it on the stove and maybe the stove has even been shut off, think about teapots that no matter if it starts to boil, it will never burn because it will automatically shut it off. putting and having pre-chopped foods, whether you buy them pre-chopped or you as the caregiver chop them up in a way, again, on the long way, julienne style, versus in little circles, but having it easy access. We all know I love vegetables, but I tend to eat most of my vegetables when I'm at a party because they have a veggie tray, and I'm like, I love broccoli. But when I go and buy a head of broccoli, I may not be as good at cutting it up in that same way and having it in just small baggies. And I tend to then find that, my veggies that I was so enjoying when they were all cut up for me, I'm not enjoying as much because I haven't done the prep work. And when I want it, I don't maybe want to do the prep work in that moment. So creating the atmosphere. If you look at these two plates of food, both with pork chops, which would you rather eat? I certainly would rather eat that lovely one with the fork laid next to it, and how it is put on the plate with the sauce. The other plate is overwhelming to me. If I have visual impairment concerns, I am not going to see the difference between the Brussels sprouts, the macaroni and cheese, the meat, and the dressing. And that goes with those who are living with cognitive concerns as well. Too much food for someone who may have a small appetite, and the idea of even looking at that feels like they are now eating their second Thanksgiving meal within 5 minutes of each other. So really think about how we plate the food for individuals. And something that we spend time, and this month with Nutrition Month, that we spend time sharing with caregivers how best to put food in front of somebody so that it's enjoyable to eat. It's fun to eat. I had a caregiver who would make up tuna salad, but instead of just putting it out, she would make it on a plate with into a face, and it was fun. It was a conversation starter. Cutting up food in different shapes. It doesn't take any more time, but the end result is so much of an improvement. They have found, and there's been a lot of research, in fact, a lot of research now in Asia, that eating with your eyes, which is something we hear all the time, is actually hardwired in the brain. And it comes from, over the time of man starting in caveman days, that what we eat is certainly a visual experience. So make it so. Create an atmosphere. Put out placemats and napkins and silverware, maybe that's adapted as needed. Use lightweight plastic options that look like glass, jars, but are safer and lighter to pick up. Eating meals together, we all tend to enjoy meals more when they're shared with someone. Be attentive, though. Don't be on your phone. Have a question of the night ready to be a conversation starter. Make it appropriate to the cognitive level. There's actually boxed sets of conversation starters for mealtime that you can buy in the store. You can also go online and look up conversation starters for seniors, conversation starters for kids, whatever it is, and just have that list and ask questions. Again, make sure it's appropriate to where someone is at a cognitive level so they don't feel put upon, but really engage with them during that dining experience. Think about how you recreate past rituals. Did the older adults you're caring for or the person in your life have a ritual at mealtime? Did they say grace? Did their spouse pull out their chair? Whatever it is, recreate that. Engage in that once more. Really make it a dining experience. Involve the senior in the meal. Find something that they can participate in, big or small, whether it's stirring or chopping or even just folding napkins. And maybe they fold a lot of them. Maybe you have someone with a cognitive decline who really can't participate, but they may enjoy, because they were someone who was so active in the kitchen preparation, have a pile of fabric napkins and let them fold those napkins. Let them feel like they're a part of the meal. Let them choose which one at the end they want to use, which color they want to use, make them vibrant or with prints, and really engage them during that time, but in a safe way. More food is not better. Appetites can diminish with age and illness. Don't overserve. It's better to give seconds than to overwhelm someone with a big plate of food. Consider using smaller plates than the omnipresent 9-inch plate that we're used to. This is really important. As a hospice social worker for many years, one of the areas that families struggled with the most was changes in the appetite of their loved one. And towards end of life, people certainly have a decline in food intake. And we have equated in our society the intake of food with the increase in health. You know, feed a fever, starve a cold. But there's a point in our lives, in our physical lives, in our health, that doesn't play in any longer. And in fact, it can do the opposite, that too much food that the body can't process can just make someone sick. And so we really want to allow people to enjoy the act of eating for as long as they want and can, but do it in a way that doesn't make them, as I said, feel like they've just had their second Thanksgiving dinner in 5 minutes of each other. Think about how you enhance the aromas. Aromatics can enhance appetite. Consider using essential oils in the dining room, things like citrus that really kind of stimulate appetite. Make sure someone is not sensitive to fragrances, but try them in small quantities and see if that does help with enhancing their appetite. Again, be very mindful of presentation. Cutting foods in interesting shapes is not only good for the visual effect, but it can absolutely aid in swallowing and digestion as well. Hydration. Don't underestimate the importance of good hydration. Ensure that water is always accessible and in an easy-to-drink container. Before caregivers leave a senior's home, we always ask if there's to make sure that their water bottle or whatever they are drinking out of is filled with, fresh, cool water or whatever temperature they like it, so it's easily accessible to them. Encourage hydration throughout the day as we're moving into summertime and spring and summer. For some people around the country, I'm sure it's hard to even see spring with all these storms, but encourage fluids throughout the day. Get that set now so that as summer heat comes in, people have developed better habits. Really ensure that people are not limiting their hydration because of urinary control problems. Oftentimes people, particularly, both men and women who are having urinary issues and having to go and urinate a lot, tend to limit what they're drinking. And it's that much more important to ensure that they are flushing out their system. And so really make sure that people are not limiting because of it. Discuss with the physician if there are any limitations on water or fluid consumption, because there are some situations where a physician is going to want to limit how much fluid is being consumed. Caffeinated beverages can be a bit more dehydrating, not to the point that we've thought of them in the past, but really more due to their mild diuretic effect. So again, limit their intake or alternate with water. Reward yourself with that cup of coffee, but first have a cup of water. So think about some of the tips and tools of things we've talked about. There's a couple of wonderful government sites on nutrition. One, if you go to choosemyplate.gov, and this is also with the National Aging Council. It will show a plate and the different proportion of fruits and vegetables that should be eaten as we age. My Plate, which is up on the screen, which was developed by the Nutritional Council, Tufts University, AARP, also kind of guides what a plate of food should look like for older adults. The ALZ store, ALZ store, is a great resource for looking for dining adaptive equipment for those at all stages along Alzheimer's or dementia, and you can purchase by stage as well as by need. The Elder store also has a lot of adaptive devices and can also be purchased by disease type. So they have a whole section for Parkinson's and all of the dietary kind of adaptive equipment. The National Council on Aging.org has wonderful resources on nutrition and the older adult. Alzheimer's organization, so the ALZ.org website also talks a lot about food preparation and dietary adaptations for those who are living with Alzheimer's and dementia. Nutrition.gov is also a site to be able to access for lots of information. Also, many of these sites have actual kind of recipes and different ways to prepare food. And certainly always feel free to start at the Synergy HomeCare website, one which will lead you to accessing your local office where we, again, the caregivers can really help enhance the dining experience, the food intake, the nutritional health for seniors, as well as having resources available on that site. So I'm going to turn to the questions. I have a few here that I will just take a moment to look at. So someone asked, and from a kind of a senior housing perspective, where, you know, again, for many seniors, the dining experience is so key. You know, how to really engage people who are stating that they are leaving or people want to leave because of the food. You know, I think there's a couple of things. Food is absolutely a key component in the lives of seniors, mostly, again, because of the emotional aspect and the social aspect of getting out. So really, I think kind of looking at the overall kind of environment that's being set, ensuring that residents have options and choices, that they feel that they have the ear. You know, many years ago, I worked in a senior housing site, and we had a food council. It was probably one of my the meetings that I dreaded the most, because I knew that we were going to have very vocal residents on it. But it really did, after we kind of got through some of the initial kind of venting about the food, really was able to have the residents feel that they had a voice and were being heard, and that the decisions that were now on their plate were really based on them. You know, maybe having introduced some new choices and have, you know, like a voting. So put out, you know, 3 different things. We're going to introduce a new soup this month and have 3 different kinds, and let them choose which one. You know, all of which would meet the nutritional guidelines that need to be met for your license and for, you know, nutritional health, but allow people to kind of vote on them, and then let people know on the menu that this is the resident's choice vote. Again, I think the more that people are engaged in it, the better. Just looking. Is it true that people who are less active require reduced calorie diets? So there's certainly an impact between caloric intake and activity, but it actually can work the opposite way, that the less activity someone has, the less hunger that they have. So if you're needing to kind of increase someone's nutritional health, you know, trying to get them to be active in whatever way fits for their physical condition is helpful. But yes, the less active someone is, you know, food is energy. So if you're not putting out any energy in the rate of activity, then you're not needing as much caloric intake. But it is that much more important that the calories you are taking in are really the ones that your body needs, based on, you know, the meds that you're taking, based on your physical diagnoses, etc. So there's definitely an interplay, and many of the resource sites that I showed will talk about that, and you can really kind of look at how to make those judgments. So someone asked about different, like, protein drinks, and again, I'm not a dietitian, but what I will say is that a lot of those drinks, you know, Ensure and Boost and things like that, can be really helpful if someone has difficulty with chewing or eating a lot of things or needing to add calories. We used to Ensure and Boost can be quite expensive. Sometimes things like and I'm not because of the company, but Carnation Instant Breakfast often will have the same type of ingredients, but are going to be less expensive. Adding fruits into those also can bulk up the calories. Finding something that someone likes. And again, if it is okay to have some added fats and things like that into someone's diet, adding ice cream if that's going to be the way that they're going to take it in. So working with a dietitian, working with a physician is key, but it may certainly be a benefit. So, okay, so someone is concerned about their parent losing weight, and they're thinking it's okay, that parent is, but now is really in a kind of a failure to thrive weight loss piece. One, really think about, and particularly for women, how weight is something that socially, emotionally is something we struggle with in society daily. And it came to me years ago when I was working with a woman who was in her late 80s who had dementia but also had a heart condition. And when I took her to her doctor's office and they wanted to weigh her because certainly her weight was going to be impacted in her heart health, and she didn't want to get on the scale because she never got on the scale. And I said to her, Mrs. Smith, are you going to tell me that I have to look forward to thinking about my weight every single day of my life until I'm in my 90s? And she said yes. And I then also told her that she doesn't have to get onto the scale any other time except at the heart doctor. I won't look because of the medication she's on. But it really reminded me how people really focus on their weight. And so one, make sure that someone is not losing weight because they feel like now's their time to be the optimal weight that they've been. Two, see about choices and options. See what feels good about eating and begin to slowly introduce foods in that way. Talk to the physician and a dietitian about, is it okay to incorporate some of those heavier, fatty, caloric foods that may have more fat in them, but are going to have the calories to help someone gain weight, and then slowly try to introduce some things like proteins into them and vegetables or not vegetables and ice cream, but fruits into them. So kind of looking at it. But again, I think it goes back to always making sure that you ask the question of the person and try to get to understand more of what's behind their reasoning. For senior living facilities, someone asked about, how they're inspected. Because it's been so long since I've worked in a senior living facility, depending on the state and how they are audited, there are very specific rules in many states in terms of senior housing facilities and dietary programs for lots of different parts of it, just like in any restaurant they would be. But they're also looking at changes in weight throughout the population that may be in that facility. So there's a lot of different things that go into it. There was also a comment about, caregivers who may not themselves have been, big cooks and things like that. One of the things that's important in it, and as a program that we do, is to give people the resources and tools to know how to make things that are good for the clients that we're serving. And sometimes what we say, well, just make this, this, and this, and somebody may never have made that kind of food for themselves. They're not going to be able to translate that to know what that means for somebody else. And so just having some basic cooking classes and giving some very simple instructions on ways to present food, give some ideas, make a little booklet up about it so that if someone's wanting to have tuna, here's, 3 different ways to prepare it. Or if you're going to have eggs, here's, ways to make it and prepare it and put it out on a plate. So really giving people the tools and the resources to get to the goals that we want them to have. I'm just going to wait one more moment until we see if there's any more questions. I really appreciate how many questions there have been. Want to remind everybody that if you want to learn more about how Synergy Home Care Services can assist you or client or patient or someone you're caring for, to please contact us, and you'll find your local office and they can absolutely assist you. It may begin just as making sure that someone has good, healthful meals, and may turn into much more. If you want to receive your certificate of attendance for attending today's course, please just email me at Carla, that's with a C, Sutter, at synergyhomecare.com. And we look forward to, again, if you aren't already on the list for receiving these through our newsletter and knowing when our monthly webinar is, on the synergyhomecare.com page, you can also register to be part of our newsletter and be able to get information about all our upcoming webinars, as well as on our Facebook page to Synergy Home Care, that we post all of these webinars. I believe next month is going to be all about having the conversation on healthcare choices and advanced care planning. So a really key and important topic for people of all ages. So again, I appreciate your attention, your interest. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any additional questions or want more resources. Thank you so much.